What do you say, everybody? Welcome to the Bama Insider YouTube channel. It's time for Monday Night Quarterback. It's presented by Westgate Luxury Condominiums, and we're going to talk some Alabama, still with some hope that maybe the Crimson Tide have a chance to get into the college football playoff. We're going to get into basketball a little bit. I mean, you got to. They knocked off number one North Carolina in 4 overtimes. That was pretty incredible. We'll get into some recruiting, a big commitment today for Alabama with Joseph Hastings coming on later in the show. But before I get to Clint Lamb, let me remind you guys that you're hanging out with us here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Do the thing that I'm going to ask you to do all night, and that's like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the bell. You do all those things, and we're going to love you for it. The bell, that's when you know our shows are live. The thumbs up, it's a way of saying roll tide. We appreciate that. And don't forget, right now, you can subscribe to On 3, Bama On 3. Now that we've made the switch, we want you to make it with us. Got away from rivals, went to On 3. The face of team coverage is changing right in front of our very eyes, and we want you guys to be a part of it. BamaInsider.com, On 3. $10 for a year or $1 for 4 months. Any way you look at it, you get Andrew Bones recruiting with Joseph Hastings. You get all the team coverage, the message board with Clint Lamb and Jimmy Stein, and there's way more to come. So take my word for it. Now is the time to join up. And WestgateAL.com for more information. That's the last place I saw Clint. So it is confirmed that you made it away from the buffet. I actually hit it before the game. There was steak. They do that at the Skygate Club. It was delicious.
Look, when I realized there was food in there and we got off, I did some unforgivable things. It was really good, man. It was great food across the board, man. They had some kind of sauce that I was dipping roast beef in. I don't even know what all was happening, but it was magical.
Hey, no doubt about it. Hey, all you guys in the comments section, Brock and Kelvar and all you guys, man, Roll Tide, thanks for being here. Marcos, I just appreciate all you guys hanging out with us tonight, talking Alabama football. And we'll keep an eye on what you got going on as well. Throw a question out there, man. I mean, we got time tonight. We can talk about that. Hey, maybe ask Clint what he ate at at Westgate. That's where we do the post-game show. I thought the steak was amazing. The bread was great. I'm not even supposed to be eating bread on my diet. And they have 2 drink fountains, one for Coke and one for Pepsi. I mean, how many places have that under their belt?
Man, I couldn't decide. You know, a lot of times these places decide it for you. And I was like, man, I got options here. So started off with a little Coke. Second time I went back, I got a little Pepsi. So nice. I'm a big carbonated beverage drinker. Probably shouldn't be, but it's kind of my thing. I don't really drink a whole lot of alcohol. So it's carbonated beverages for me. And yeah, Westgate had quite the selection.
Yeah, no doubt. Diamond Girl, see you out there too. Roll Tide. All right, well, let's get into it right away. Let's get into this Iron Bowl. We'll talk about our thoughts on Alabama's chance to get into the playoffs a little later. But let's just kind of recap the Iron Bowl. For those of you that didn't hang out with us on Saturday night, you'll be hearing it for the first time. Or maybe, for Clint, he's had a chance to reflect a little bit. I thought it was refreshing to see Alabama dispose of Auburn. Could have been a lot worse than the score, but Auburn did a good job of fighting to the very end for Cadillac, who lost his job today. He was interim, and now Hugh Freeze is taking over. That may be something you want to talk about too. But just getting into your final thoughts on the Iron Bowl. Could be the last time we see Bryce Young in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Could be the last time he's ever in an Alabama uniform, but another good performance by him and a convincing win.
Yeah, I thought it was a great performance by him, and we talked about it a little bit on the post-game show, but one of the big things that I thought was encouraging about Alabama's performance on offense was that what they were calling was working. What Bill O'Brien was calling was working. Like, you didn't see nearly as much where Bryce Young had to improvise and create more time because the routes or whatever it is that they had called didn't work initially. And it was him, really creating on his own and being what we've called, a magician all season. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you're able to hit vertical shots and teams have to start playing or respecting your deep ball, then that's going to open up all sorts of possibilities. And then when Bryce Young also started throwing in his legs as another potential weapon or avenue for offensive success, I think that really opened up everything else as well. And really, you just saw guys clicking. And we talked about, Ja'Cory Brooks had a good game. Jermaine Burton continues to get, more and more comfortable. I feel like statistically, this wasn't his best game. That was against Austin Peay, but I would say that he probably looked better on a snap-to-snap basis than I've seen him at any point this year. I will be curious to see if he chooses to leave early for the NFL draft or if he likes to come back. I do know that, there's nothing really from a height, weight, speed, standpoint that screams first-round talent. So I think that if you're going to be that kind of player, a John Mechie style of player, you really need to have the production. And I don't think Jermaine Burton has done that enough. So if I were him, I would choose to come back to Tuscaloosa for another season, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But I thought it was a great performance from him. I thought it was encouraging from Robbie Oots, being able to catch the football with some consistency. I thought he blocked well, especially on the perimeter. That's something that they've been missing for quite a while. So just collectively across the board on offense, very encouraging performance. Defensively, you give up over 300 yards on the ground. I think run fits was a huge problem for the two inside linebackers. It wasn't necessarily that they I will say this, they weren't playing timid or anything. I think if anything, they were playing over aggressive and they were over pursuing some gaps and stuff, but it was because they were, really energized, really enthused. The defense played with a ton of energy in general. So that's certainly encouraging. If guys are going to make mistakes, you want them to do it 100 miles an hour, but at least, guys were, playing hard and going to the whistle.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've thought about it a lot too since the game. And, offensively, Alabama had one of their best games of the year against a real opponent, right? You mentioned Burton, the long pass that he caught. Nick Saban mentioned in the post game that he felt like Bryce Young was finally healthy. So, maybe the shoulder lingered a lot more than we thought. And the other part of that too is for Alabama. I mean, he was definitely hurt in both of those games, injured anyway, playing through it. But he looked different in the game. The run game was better. I thought you're exactly right. I thought this was Bill O'Brien's best performance as far as, just being creative is about time, right? And Nick Saban was asked about that in the post game too. And he was like, well, we kind of self-evaluated and came up with this. You talked about it in the post game show, Robbie Oots. I thought it was just great watching him, pancake block dudes and truck people and run down the field and catch the ball. You got to do all those things as a tight end, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree. And it's not that, Cameron Latou was still involved on every offensive snap. He still played or participated in every snap, which was something that was kind of become a common theme with him. He can catch the football. He can block in line. He's really considered a complete tight end. That doesn't mean that he does everything well, but he does enough where he's not really one dimensional. He's not too much of a blocker specific, or he's not just only a pass catcher. He can do both. It's just the perimeter blocking had been struggling. And so, even though this was his last game inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, and I'm sure they wanted to have him, as involved as possible, they also were willing to say, hey, this is something that you just haven't simply been good enough in an area, and we're going to try to do something to correct that. And so I thought that was encouraging. And I thought Bill O'Brien just being willing to take the shots downfield, in games past, it felt like they would attempt a deep ball and it wouldn't work out. Maybe they would attempt a second one. It wouldn't work out. And then they completely abandoned it. And I thought that was a huge mistake. Now, granted, some of that, I don't know the full health status of Bryce Young, so I'm sure that played a part, but you also saw that early in the year too, before Bryce ever got hurt, or at least at times. But in this game, it was like, it doesn't matter. They were connecting or they weren't connecting. It didn't, prevent them from continuing to take shots. They played, a lot of RPO or implemented a lot of RPO in the offense. They threw in some screens. They threw in some jet sweeps, some, get the ball in the receiver's hands without having to throw it to them. I just thought that across the board, it was a great performance. In the offensive line, they got, collectively player of the week, according to the coaching staff. I thought that was well deserved. I thought they were really good blocking, whether it be run blocking or in pass protection. You got to remember, Auburn had a ton of sacks, a ton of pressures, ton of hits, ton of, everything last year against Alabama. This year they had 0 sacks. They only had a couple of hurries, and that was it. So give the offensive line a ton of credit for allowing Bryce Young to stay upright and operate the offense. And I thought, just in general, can't say enough good things about the offensive side of the football. And what's unfortunate is that I think that, think about the two best times, whether it be quarters, halves, games, whatever, that we've seen Alabama's offense. To me, it was this Auburn game, just operating as it should. And then it was that first quarter against Arkansas before Bryce Young got hurt. They were taking the deep shots, doing a lot of different things. And it's unfortunate because had Bryce Young not gotten hurt and they could have done this style of offense throughout the year, we might not be talking about them having 2 losses and sitting on the outside of the college football playoff.
Yeah, maybe not. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to say right now. I'm still uncomfortable with the way that the Tennessee game was officiated, but maybe if he's healthy, you score a few more points. The problem is, and I saw some of the comments in the comment section, is the defense. They still gave up all those yards on the ground to Auburn. They had a tough time slowing down Ashford when he was running, and they knew he couldn't throw the ball. I mean, he did throw one really good pass, perfect pass, but besides that touchdown, you're not really that concerned with his ability to throw the ball. Even when he's going to run it, they still couldn't really stop it every time. I mean, they made enough plays to win, but all in all, the turnovers to me were the difference in the game. Because Alabama cashed in on those every time they got one. Are you concerned at all? Is this where the game is, or does Alabama's defense need to stiffen up in the future?
Well, I think that it's like I said, their run fits weren't great. They over pursued some plays, presented some opportunities, some creases, and Auburn has the rushing attack to be able to take advantage of it. So I think that's an element of this. I think that they didn't do a good enough job tackling, rallying to the football and making tackles and bringing guys to the ground. I think that was super important as far as an area that they need to improve on. And, we talked about it a little bit in the post-game show and how, a lack of tackling and practice certainly, I'm sure, contributes to that to some degree. But as one of the callers pointed out, Georgia figures out a way to get it done. So why can't Alabama? And he's absolutely right. So that excuse only goes so far. I think it does affect things. But, also, I think, they didn't probably spy Robbie Ashford enough. I saw it a little bit. And going back through, I was more so paying attention to the defensive line when I was going back through the game this first time. I'll have to go back and see how often they actually spot him. But that's something that I think they probably could have done more of, especially because you didn't have to commit as much to the pass. Like you could have left guys in man on the back half of your defense and really played the numbers game to make sure you were spying him and preventing him from having big plays. And you just didn't see that a whole lot. So I don't know what the reasoning was behind that. I'm sure there's something that was contributing. Nothing I've seen on tape as of yet. But yeah, I think it was a kind of a collective thing. But I've seen, a couple of Auburn fans ribbing, on Facebook and stuff like that, saying, they just gave up, Alabama's defense just gave up 300 plus yards rushing to, Auburn's offense. There's no way they deserve to be in the college football playoff. And my rebuttal to that is they allowed over 300 yards rushing to Georgia Southern in 2011, and they still won the national title. So sometimes you just have poor performances, and I think that this was certainly one of them for Alabama's defense.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the score really indicated how the game went, right? When you score 49 and the other team scores 27, you blew them out. They covered the spread as well. So, but look, let's use that as a transition. The beatdown that Auburn got. How does that affect Alabama's chances? We've seen the coaches and the AP poll come out, and in both of those, it doesn't look good for Alabama because Ohio State is ahead. Now, that doesn't mean they're out of it, right? I mean, if TCU and USC both lost, maybe the Alabama could get in, and that's where I want to debate right now. I feel like it's going to be really tough to be ahead of Ohio State, despite the fact that they got bludgeoned at home by Michigan, and Alabama only lost twice. And I think it's because Alabama doesn't really have the quality wins, right? I mean, there's nothing to really hang your hat on. I mean, at least I think that's what, the counter argument's going to be. Ohio State won all their games in their weak conference by double digits, including, going to Penn State and beating up a team that blew out Auburn. But with that said, I mean, Alabama lost twice in two really hostile environments. They're the highest rated 2-loss team. And so here we go right here. Your thoughts on what we're going to see tomorrow and your thoughts on Alabama being able to get in somehow.
Yeah, there's a couple of points here. Number one, I mean, there's going to be two angles, right? There's going to be the Alabama side of this that's going to be arguing losses. And then there's the Ohio State side of this that's going to be arguing wins. And I think that both sides, have valid points, and they're going to be able to bring, quality arguments to the table. The problem is that, historically speaking, the committee has really favored one-loss teams, right? I mean, Penn State beat Ohio State head-to-head, and Penn State went on to win the Big Ten title that year. And yet, because they had lost twice and Ohio State had only lost once, Ohio State was the one to go over Penn State. And I think that kind of set a precedent there, right? So, yeah. and it's not just that year. It's been a lot of other years as well. It just seems like they favor the one-loss team over the two-loss team. Now, I do think that, you look at that loss and it was rough. At least it was to, the number 2 team in the country now. I think that's really important. But all of their other games, if I'm not mistaken, I was going back and looking earlier, I don't think Ohio State has allowed a single other team to come within 10 points. So Alabama's had 5 of their games decided by 6 points or fewer. I think that kind of matters. So if I had to guess, Ohio State's probably going to be ranked number 5, and Alabama's going to check in at number 6. Then it becomes, can TCU and USC both lose? I think if USC loses, they're a 2-loss team. They don't win the Pac-12. They're out of this conversation. TCU's the main one because I do think it's going to be Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia, and Ohio State simply because they don't have a game this week. And they're kind of, in my opinion, they're almost a shoe-in. At least the other teams have to go play, but I think they're probably still in regardless if they lose or win anyways as well. So it's one real spot at that point, and it's TCU versus Alabama. And if TCU loses, now I think that there's an argument to be made. Because you look, I mean, Alabama, their opponent's win-loss record is substantially better than TCU's. I think point differential as far as points scored versus points allowed, Alabama's sitting up there in the 270 range as far as the margin, plus, 273, I think 272, something like that. And TCU's down there in the low 200s, like 203 or 202. So that's pretty substantial as far as the difference there. I just think that there's a lot of underlying things that really point in Alabama's direction. But yet again, you're looking at 1 loss versus 2 loss, and how will the committee view that? I think it's possible they could go with Alabama. This would be their best opportunity for a 2-loss team, but it's also very possible that it could still be TCU.
Right. Even if they lose, it just all depends. I mean, this isn't a really compelling championship Saturday coming up, but with that said, anything can happen. I mean, and I feel like Alabama is one of the 4 best teams. I mean, forget about the wins and losses. They played basically an NFL road schedule. No one else did that. For every Penn State game that Ohio State played on the road, they played 4 Vanderbilts. So it's not like you can really compare that. Alabama dominated the games that they played at home, even the one they lost that they beat Texas A&M. I mean, not on the scoreboard, but statistically. Bryce Young being hurt. And then the other thing, Clint, is that that Alabama hadn't been blown out. They're not going to get blown out. They lost to the Georgia Bulldogs last year. They had the lead in the 4th quarter and then kind of bit some injuries. Every time Alabama plays, it's a high TV game. Revenue-wise, everybody wants to buy into it. They want to see Alabama lose. We want to see them win. A lot of people want to see them lose. So that, to me, makes them compelling.
You're 100% correct on that. Yeah. And I think that one of the big things that really favors Alabama, when you look in 2019, they ended up getting left out. I mean, obviously because of things that ended up happening, they were never going to get in. But when they were in that conversation, people were still wondering, would Alabama have a chance to get in? The problem is that they had lost their starting quarterback. They were sort of in a similar situation to what Tennessee is in right now. And when you view them,
that's right.
Even though I think Mac Jones was still a heck of a quarterback, it was much better in 2019 than people give him credit for, just due to that Iron Bowl, 1 bad throw, not even 2. It was only 1 was a poor decision or a poor throw. The other one was just fluky. But, I think that negatively affected them. What I think Alabama has going for them right now when it comes to a potential TCU-Alabama debate, which is what I really think this is coming down to, USC has to lose and TCU has to lose, in my opinion. But if that is how it ended up playing out, I think that the fact that the committee's looking at Bryce Young and they're saying, okay, the receivers have been around long enough where they're getting confident. And I think that was a huge issue early. Jermaine Burton, Kobe Prentice, Isaiah Bond, so many different guys, Bryce had so many new weapons that they were still getting on the same page. And then the timing of the injury was very unfortunate. And then he couldn't practice and you couldn't get that chemistry. Now that he's healthy and he looks healthy, and Alabama's offense is performing or operating at what you would expect it to look like, or what we had all expected to look like all year, You throw that in with the fact that the receivers are getting more comfortable and the chemistry is finally, starting to get there. The committee might view this as a completely different team than it was, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago. And if they view it that way and they feel like they are the better football team compared to TCU, it's possible they could end up putting them in.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. I mean, tomorrow will give us an idea of what we're looking at, and we'll see. I mean, what if Tennessee was ranked ahead of Alabama, which would, the Tennessee fans seem to think for some reason that because they beat Alabama that they're supposed to be ahead, but they got their butts whooped twice, not once, but twice. That the embarrassment against South Carolina was, to me, one of the worst losses for any team this season. I know they beat Clemson too, but I don't think Alabama has to worry about anyone coming from behind. It would just be the teams ahead. All right, let's talk about one more thing before we bring on Joseph Hastings to get into recruiting. Some big news on that front, hanging out with Clint Lamb here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel and hanging out with you guys as well. I appreciate you all in the comment section. Like and subscribe, hit the thumbs up. Paying attention, seeing what you guys want to kind of get into. And, we'll talk recruiting the same way here in a couple minutes. But hit the thumbs up. That's a way of saying roll tide and the bell to know when we're live. And don't forget, now that we're part of On3, we're changing the face of team coverage. You guys probably already know that. We came over from Rivals last year to join On3. On3's got a lot more things coming. You can join On3 right now, $10 for an entire year. It's worth trying, man. It's $10 for all the coverage, the recruiting, the message boards, all the nuggets, all the stuff going on around the program. We're going to have it, and we're just going to keep on getting better and better. And one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, man, this is crazy how good On3 and Bama On3 is. All right, Clint, I got to give the basketball team a lot of credit. I mean, look, we got to give them credit, guys. They won in 4 overtimes against North Carolina in an epic battle yesterday. Nate Oates went out and rebuilt this roster. I mean, I don't even recognize a lot of these guys. And yet they play like a team that's been together for 4 years. Look, Quinterly, I mean, we know him and, some of the other guys, but the new faces. This is a much better team than last year. I don't have to see Davidson throw the ball away, half the game and, look good, turning it over. These guys can play, man. And they beat number one. It's like what, the 5th time in school history, 4th or 5th time ever that Alabama beat the number 1 team in the country. So, wow, what a win over North Carolina. And when you beat UNC in basketball, Clint, that's when your program's in a good place.
Yeah, and the fact that it was, you had the win against Michigan State. You immediately followed that up with a tough game against UConn. You lose that game by double digits, and it was Alabama's ability to bounce back. And, it was only 2 days later. So in a 4-day period, they played 3 top 20 teams, and they won 2 of them. And what's crazy about this is that they've turned over so much of their roster compared to last year that I don't think we've even come close to seeing Alabama scratch the surface of what it can be this year. Like, I still think they're getting better, and they're learning to play, with each other more. And you just see Charles Bediako. He is completely, you can see the mass that he's gained in his body. You can see that he's been in the weight room playing a lot more physical. When he's out there, he's a difference maker.
Yeah.
And really, Brandon Miller, the fact that Brandon Miller didn't play that well yesterday, and you didn't have Noah Clowney out there, and Alabama still found a way to beat the top team in the country. What a special performance by them. They've climbed up, I think, to number 11 now.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be shocked at all. Here's the thing, though. We saw Alabama beat a lot of really good teams last year. They beat Baylor. They beat Gonzaga. They beat some squads. It was the letdown games against teams that you shouldn't lose to that really, bit them, right? And so I'll be curious to see. You love seeing them play at such a high level. You love the potential. The only question I really have right now is, can they continue to do this consistently, continue to get this sort of effort, don't get lackadaisical or don't start buying into your own hype, and then make sure that you put away the teams that you should put away. And if they can do that, they're a top 10 team in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got a feeling this team's going to be a lot more mature than last year's team, and part of that is taking care of inferior competition. All right, last thing before we bring on Joseph Hastings for the second half of Monday Night Quarterback to talk recruiting. Auburn hired Hugh Freeze today. What an unceremonious ending to his time at Liberty. They got spanked by New Mexico State, which I'm sure Kyle would be happy about. I mean, Kyle Henderson from New Mexico, one of the biggest wins ever for them here lately. I mean, they were like a 24-point dog. And ever since, these guys have been talking, Liberty can't win, but he signs a contract today. So he's back in the SEC, did beat Alabama twice. There was rumblings that Nick Saban wanted him as offensive coordinator. They wouldn't let that happen a few years ago. I don't know how true that is or not, but he got Ole Miss in trouble with, the stuff that he did there, the probation and everything. And Auburn has, again, gone with one of these coaches that has a track record of, to be honest with you, cheating, right? I mean, that's what it is. I don't think Bruce Pearls is really on the same level as Hugh Freeze, but now that the game's changed, I mean, I'm sure it's not even cheating anymore to, pay for strippers or whatever else. Still, he's a great coach, and this guy can score points.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, when you lose a talent like Malik Willis, who I thought from a tools perspective was a first-round talent, he fell to the third round. A lot of people thought he would go in the first round. Just a cannon for an arm, has pure, elite, pure athleticism. When you lose a talent like that at a place like Liberty, and you're able to kind of, keep things trucking along, this isn't Georgia, this isn't Alabama, this isn't Ohio State. It's not next man up at a place like that. So you normally feel it a lot more, and yet Hugh Freeze was still able to win football games without Malik Willis, and I think that's really important to point out. Not only did he get Malik Willis from Auburn and really, develop him into what he was, he also was able to win without him and prove that he could. I don't really count that New Mexico State game. I totally think that the squad quit on him because they knew that the rumors were true and that he was probably leaving. So I don't hold it against him. What's interesting is, back when I was a senior in high school, Hugh Freeze was the head coach at Lambeth. He brought me and my parents in. He was the one that offered me a scholarship. So I sat and talked with him in person, and we talked for a long time, both, him and both my parents. And I really bought into him. I really wanted to go play for him. I didn't want to go play for the university, which I think Lambeth has since shut down, but he almost had me buying in completely to the university as well. Think he's a great recruiter. Think he's a great coach. There's some questionable stuff, and I don't know the full story. I can't speak to his character because, there's some stuff that I probably don't know, some underlying things at Liberty that he's been accused of or whatever. But from an X's and O's standpoint and just what I know about him, I think it's a good hire, especially, with Lane Kiffin turning them down like I think he did. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But if they didn't get Hugh Freeze, I don't really know who they were going to go after or who would have accepted the job. So this could have spiraled rather quickly. It's going to come with some backlash, but they've, and this is going to be way more extreme than anything that Bruce Pearl brought with him. But, at least, they have some experience on that front.
Right. And I've heard that they've got a pretty good war chest NIL thing going down at Auburn. And I've also heard Alabama needs to do a better job in that front. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's just kind of the rumblings on the street and where the game is now. And I mean, Nick Saban kind of got that whole thing going. I'm talking about Jimbo Fisher over NIL. Going to be curious. I mean, Auburn's dangerous. They got the new player facility down there. This guy's got a lot to prove. And they've won championships before. He got an upgrade from the Ole Miss job.
Yeah. And, a lot of people feel like he got the job because of what he was able to do against Nick Saban. Still the only coach to ever beat him in back-to-back years. The game has changed so much since then. And I think from a recruiting standpoint, he's not going to do quite as well because I do think that there was some, not up to par, business dealings that were happening before this whole NIL thing came along. And I think that now that it's an even playing field, he probably won't recruit as well as he did at Ole Miss, but I still think he's a great recruiter regardless. Still think he's going to be able to get some players, to Auburn. They're right over there on the Georgia State line. I think they'll be able to go into that state and get some, at least a couple of good players every year. But they really need to recruit the offensive line better. I think that's been a huge area of concern. Whether he was paid or not, they were, Hugh Freeze was able to go out there and get Laramie Tunsil at one point, and he ended up being a pretty special player for Ole Miss. So if they can go get a couple of those guys, I don't know how you get them to the Plains, but however you get them there, that could really help their squad because I think that's the trenches has been a huge issue for them and just recruiting in general. So if they can get that corrected, I think they got a coach who can call plays. I think they got a coach that can develop talent. But, man, it's going to come with some backlash, that's for sure.
Yeah, and look, great transition to our next guest. But Clint before we get into recruiting with Joseph Hastings, I'm going to kind of ask him the same question now that Hugh Freeze is down there eventually. We'll talk about all the good things going on around Alabama's recruiting. What are you working on? And tell folks how they can find you.
Man, I've been having some fun. The transfer portal on December 5th is going to get crazy. I don't think people realize just how crazy it's going to get. You might kind of have an idea, but understand whatever you're thinking is going to happen, it's going to be about 2 or 3 times that. They're expecting it to completely blow up, and it's going to change the college football landscape even more than it already has. You're going to have some really big name guys getting in there trying to get a big, NIL deal or whatever. You might see some big name players make some switches as far as the schools they're playing for, but we're hitting that really hard. I was going through today and yesterday and assessing, Alabama's positions of need potentially in the transfer portal and some areas they might look to add somebody as far as the positions are concerned. And the one that I did on the defense that came out probably about an hour ago, about an hour and a half, it was 2,500 words. And I dove into every position and really broke down pretty much almost everybody on the roster and just how they fit in, where Alabama can look or might want to turn, why they might not want to, why they might not need to. I talked about the commitments and where they fit in. So I really tried to give people a really good idea of the roster and where Alabama could head on that front. And we're going to continue to hit the transfer portal extremely hard. You got recruiting, you got a big commitment that just happened, and Joseph will talk about that. I think the receiving class they're bringing in is going to be solid. So a lot going on at BamaInsider and the Talk of Champions message boards, and we hope people join in.
Damian George, offensive lineman, transferred. That's the beginning of this. Well, Kareem Jackson did last week. So there's going to be a lot of guys, like you said, that'll be transferring. And I think this year, Clint, that there's going to be a lot of guys coming this way too. So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of happened every year, right? They've gotten some key guys, and I'll be curious to see what positions they target. I've told people, if they're worried about Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson transferring, especially if it's Jalen Milroe, if Ty Simpson wins the job or is looking like he's going to win the job, you're talking about a redshirt freshman with little to no experience, and you're talking about 2 true freshmen in Eli Holstein and Dylan Lonergan. More than likely, they're going to go into the transfer portal and try to pull an experienced quarterback to come in and compete and at least provide some depth. So once you start talking about potential additions, at the quarterback position in the portal, that creates a lot of conversation in itself.
That's right. All right, Roll Tide, man. Thank you for coming on, and we'll talk to you again real soon, Clint.
Absolutely, mate. Appreciate you.
That's Clint Lamb hanging out with us here on Monday Night Quarterback. Before we bring on Joseph Hastings, who has been patiently waiting backstage, let me remind you guys that the show's brought to you by Westgate Luxury Condominiums. That's where we were right after the game when Alabama took care of Auburn again, 3 straight in the Iron Bowl. We were up there, Skygate Club. We were enjoying the tailgate food. We were looking out over Tuscaloosa. We were seeing inside the stadium the oversized balconies, bedroom units of 1 to 5, 900 to 3,000 square feet. You got the Wolf and Sub-Zero kitchens. It really is amazing. The parking's great as well. But find out for yourself whether you're coming to town and you just want to stay and you want to live in the lap of luxury while you're visiting Tuscaloosa, or if you're looking to move to T-Town or you want a rental property, westgateal.com, and Allison will take care of you. She's great. Looking to do any of those things, she's got you covered there with Westgate. All right, let's bring him on the show. He's been in the back waiting, and now he's up front. Joseph Hastings, what's up, man? Big day today for the Crimson Tide.
Yes, it was a huge day for Alabama, a day that we were expecting to actually happen on Sunday. Jaren Hamilton was going to commit during his official visit to Alabama this past weekend, ended up doing so on Monday as I was making a couple of school stops down here in South Florida, but no worries. We have an excellent crew here at BamaInsider, got that all covered, and just a massive addition for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Their first commitment in the 2023 class in over 2 months, and you watch Jaren Hamilton's footage. I got to see him earlier this season, and honestly, you have to start with his nickname, Turbo. Brings a lot of speed to the table, can take the top off of defense, can work the middle of the field pretty well too, sits in zone coverage really nicely, finds the open spots there. Just send him on go routes like you do there. You need to have a safety over the top to help the opposing cornerback out there. He's a really special talent, and I'm rambling on. I can ramble on about Jaren Hamilton for a while. He's a Gainesville, Florida product. Gainesville's obviously my, the hometown for me. So, I'm well aware of his head coach, Mark Whittemore, the Buchholz High School program that he plays for, and just very excited to see him join up with Alabama.
Nice. Well, great win for the Crimson Tide here as they continue to build this recruiting class. And, it's exciting times in that area. When you look at with Hugh Freeze coming to town, how does that affect Alabama? Does that intensify some of these battles? Is it too late?
To be honest with you, I think it's the jury remains out on Hugh Freeze and what the potential recruiting impact means for Auburn. And the only reason why I say that is because some of the top prospects that we speak with and sources close to the recruitments, they just don't know too much about him. He's not really that much of a well-known face as a Lane Kiffin would have been. I spoke with Ruben Bain. I spoke with him a couple of hours ago down here at Miami Central High School. And I said, hey, what do you think about Hugh Freeze being hired by Auburn? Because the news literally broke that it was becoming official as I was talking to him. And he told me, yeah, I don't really know too much about him. I'm going to have to do some research. I'm not sure. And he told me a month ago that his top pick for the Auburn job, or a few weeks ago, would have been Lane Kiffin. So, had Lane Kiffin gotten the job, I think things get a lot more interesting. You mentioned the NIL move that Auburn is making. That obviously, in my opinion, probably has more of an impact on the 2023 cycle than Hugh Freeze being hired does. It's going to be tough for him. He's not as much of a well-known name as Lane Kiffin is. He's going to have to make his mark with recruits, assemble a coaching staff that they can really get behind and rally behind for these next 3 weeks here. It's going to be difficult. Maybe I expect for them to maybe score a surprise commitment for the early signing period and then try and work on some guys for the February signing period too, and maybe assemble most of their class there. It's just tough. It's really tough to build relationships this late on, because even though he is a head coach and was a head coach at Liberty isn't in the mix for guys like Ruben Bain and Quay Rousseau and James Smith, the top guys that Auburn is looking to land in this cycle. So he hasn't been able to really build those relationships yet, like a Lane Kiffin who coaches Ole Miss has. So yeah, look, long story short, had Lane Kiffin gotten the job, I would have been a little bit more concerned about Alabama's chances with some of the mutual targets with Auburn. With Hugh Freeze, the jury is still out on him.
All right, let's talk Iron Bowl then. Now we're on the subject of Auburn. Alabama took care of business on Saturday, as we all saw and enjoyed. How did that sit with the recruits that were in town?
Yeah, so let's start off with what Eric D said about Keon Keeley. Keon Keeley was a surprise addition to the Iron Bowl visitors list. He was somebody that we were initially expecting not to take any visits the rest of his recruitment after he officially visited for the Texas A&M game last month, but opted to go to Alabama instead of going to Ohio State, which in and of itself is the story of this. He had an opportunity to go to Ohio State for the game, as they call it, top 3 matchup with Michigan. Instead, he went to an Alabama-Auburn game that really doesn't have too many playoff implications, none at all. No implications for the SEC championship, and it doesn't, it's going to be tough for Alabama to get into the playoffs ultimately, but he ended up going to this game. Seemed like he had a really good time. We actually had a subscriber who posted on our message board that he was at one of the stores buying Alabama gear. He's already done that before. So, who knows? Maybe this visit was enough to put Alabama over the top. There's still going to be in-home visits next month. That's going to be really important. Ohio State's making a strong push there. But the fact that Alabama got him on campus and not Ohio State this past weekend is really significant. And then you look at James Smith, Quay Rousseau. The visit went well for them too. Quay spoke with On3's Chad Simmons about the trip, loved the environment there, loved what Alabama was able to do on defense. Talked about kind of how they would utilize him, and it'd be like a Will Anderson type role, but he can also see himself being used like a Reuben Foster, kind of a versatile player there. So, obviously those two enjoyed their time. Ruben Bain, Damari Brown, 2 South Florida targets. I talked with them. They enjoyed their trips to Tuscaloosa. They've already been there for a game in the past. Ruben last year, Damari Brown last month for the Mississippi State game. They relished their time, and it seems like Alabama has a shot to land one of those two at the very least, especially Damari Brown. I'm really feeling a lot more confidence there in terms of Alabama's chances with him, because he sees a need for himself there at the program. He comes from American heritage. They're used to winning over there. which is what Alabama is obviously accustomed to doing. And then also the American heritage to Alabama pipeline, especially at cornerback with Earl Little and Patrick Surtain. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Alabama finishes out this class. You also had Arian Carter, who visited, big time 2023 target. CJ Blocker earned an offer during his visit. He's a new cornerback target. So they got a lot of 2023 targets in town at a really crucial point. Obviously, they won't be able to get them on town in campus for game day visits the rest of the year as the season has come to a conclusion, but there's going to be some key official visits remaining in December. I think Alabama did really well and knocked it out of the park with some of these top recruits over the weekend.
Hanging out with Joseph Hastings on Monday Night Quarterback. It's presented by Westgate Luxury Condominiums. Alice and the crew over there will get you set up if you're interested in purchasing one of those units. Find out more information at westgateal.com. And mentioned before, that's where we hang out after every single Alabama football game. Well, let's talk about the recent 2023 offers, because we're kind of, getting to the end here, but there's still some guys out there.
Yeah, so I mentioned CJ Blocker there, got an offer during the visit to Alabama this past weekend, and that was something that we had alluded to before, because Alabama likes to see people in person before extending an offer, which is what they did with CJ Blocker, former Utah commit. It's going to be interesting to see if Alabama is able to get him on campus for an official visit. I imagine they will. He's going to be actually signing in February, so while most of the targets we're focused on will be signing next month on December 21st, or December 23rd in the case of Desmond Ricks, CJ Blocker is one that we'll also be paying attention to, especially with how Alabama finishes out 2023 cornerback recruiting this year, in December. So, yeah, he's someone that has interest in Alabama, likes the tradition there, enjoyed his trip for the Auburn game, said that the atmosphere was really unlike anything he's really seen before. So, it's still really early on in terms of Alabama's pursuit there, but he's someone that I could definitely envision in this class if the dominoes fall in Alabama's favor here. And then as for other 2023 offers, the only previous one before CJ Blocker was Tyler Scott last month, several weeks ago. Maybe we'll see some more, be added, especially with certain positions of need not being filled. You look at the defensive line. Maybe one is added from now until the end of the signing period in James Smith. Maybe they decide to offer someone else whose recruitment will be taken out till February. You also look at the cornerback position. They recently just offered Blocker, so maybe they're open to expanding the board again there. It's going to be interesting to see how Alabama is able to close out this class, and we're not even talking about the potential departures of any of the current 2023 commits. I'm not currently projecting that, but you have to take it into account, especially with, a couple of recruits visiting elsewhere. We saw Caleb Downs go to Ohio State. Tony Mitchell's been to Auburn and Texas A&M multiple times this season. Alabama's obviously doing their due diligence with, continuing to recruit those prospects just like they would if they weren't committed to Alabama. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how Bama closes out this class. But as of right now, I'm not expecting any more offers. Maybe they go to the transfer portal, but as for high school recruit offers, Blocker may be the last one.
Let me ask you this, and just give me an honest answer here, the best you can. But there's a lot of people on the message board, and they don't want Bill O'Brien as OC. I think that's probably going to happen. He was in the running, according to reports, for Georgia Tech. Maybe he wants to go in the NFL. That was the last report I read that, hey, going back to the NFL may be a better fit for him. There's talk in the message board here where people are like, hey, you know what, Pete Golding, what about Jeremy Pruitt? If you're going to bring in guys with show cause issues and stuff as Auburn's head coach, could you bring Pruitt back? Maybe he's not even defensive coordinator. Maybe he's just on the staff. Who knows, right? Mm-hmm. But what I want to ask you is, hypothetically, if these guys go, how does that affect the recruiting? And are there any guys that you could see, and you don't even have to name them, that would be affected in going to Alabama if one of those coaches left?
Yeah, so with Bill O'Brien, personally, I don't expect any of Alabama's 3 quarterback commitments in the 2023 and 2024 classes to be impacted. And the reason why I say that is I've spoken with each of them and one of their parents about the potential departure of Bill O'Brien. Because even when I spent time with Eli Holstein back in June, that was something that we knew was a possibility. Bill O'Brien leaving Alabama staff at some point, and I talked with him about that, but he told me that he has trust in the Crimson Tide that they'd be able to find the next offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach who would be right for him, and that he'd be able to be mentored under and be able to continue to further develop his skill set. I spoke with Dylan Lonergan's father, Dan Lonergan. He told me that Bill O'Brien has conversations with them about that possibility, and that they've been reassured that Alabama will bring in that right person. And then Julian Sain, the 2024 quarterback commit, even before he committed after his visit for the Mississippi State game, I asked him, I said, hey, how much does Bill O'Brien's potential departure have an impact on your decision in November? And he told me that really not too much, because O'Brien's been open about it. I think that's been important. And also, once again, the trust in Alabama that they'll be able to get the right person for the job. So for Bill O'Brien, I don't think it'd be too much of an impact, although he's done an excellent job with recruiting quarterbacks. I know people get on him about what they perceive to be issues with the offensive scheme, but look, he landed 2 top 10 quarterbacks in the span of a few weeks in the 2023 class, and then also got the nation's number 4 quarterback a few months later in the 2024 class. So really good job for him. But as for Pete Golding, I think it would have an impact on the 2023 class. You look at someone like Suntarian Perkins, who Golding is not only his potential future position coach, if Perkins ended up flipping to Alabama, but he's also the area recruiter in Mississippi for Perkins. Pete Golding's taking on the responsibility of recruiting guys like Eli Holstein and others in the Mississippi area. Bray Hubbard commitment there. Justin Jefferson, linebacker commitment, plays in Mississippi in JUCO. So, I think Golding's departure, in my opinion, would have more of an impact on 2023 recruiting than Bill O'Brien would.
All right, Joseph Hastings hanging out with us on Monday Night Quarterback. Last question of the night, and it's kind of along the same lines. Today we saw George transfer out, an offensive lineman. What your thoughts are? How is this long term going to affect high school recruiting? Because we just heard Clint say, "Hey, guess what? It's about to get crazy," and it was last year. I mean, Alabama lost like 17 guys. I just have this gut feeling that it's going to be there's going to be a lot of guys leaving, but there's going to be a lot of guys coming in. And then I'm just kind of wondering, like, from someone that does this for a living, like how's this going to affect what we do on signing day?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, Mick, because you take a look at Alabama and the way they've been recruiting certain positions. You look at the defensive line, and, James Smith is somebody that I expect to be in this class, but he could theoretically end up at Auburn. Ruben Bain could theoretically end up at Auburn or Miami or Louisville. Jordan Hall may end up at Georgia. So, they're really not in the play for many other defensive linemen at all. In terms of, as we approach this home stretch here, it seems like there is the possibility that those positions could be filled by a transfer portal addition. You also look at tight end too. They're really making a strong push for Georgia commit Lawson Lucky. If you don't get him, maybe there's somebody in the portal too. I think it's a tough balance that you have to try and find here in terms of, okay, that there's going to be some big names in the transfer portal already, some players entering that may be available to you, but how much do you bank on that compared to recruiting at the high school level? I think Alabama has done, out of all programs in the country, one of the best jobs in terms of balancing it. You saw with the 2022 class, they were able to sign how elite they were, mostly top to bottom, but then also being able to dip into the portal and land a Jahmyr Gibbs, landed Jermaine Burton, Eli Ricks, and Tyler Steen, and fill key positions of need. I think also what we need to take into account too is, once we get to the spring, Clint kind of alluded to it, potentially if somebody like a Jalen Milroe leaves because Ty Simpson wins the job, or other positions that may happen, that you're going to see the portal also be filled out during the spring, as we saw with Tyler Steen too, that he was a later addition to the program. So yeah, the portal's going to be really crazy this year. You're seeing a lot of players depart, especially from Texas A&M, and the struggles that they're having there. I think that it could get really interesting in terms of how Alabama approaches things in January and February if they're not able to land some of these top guys at the high school level. So yeah, it's going to be a fun ride. Clint, Andrew, and I, and Jimmy are going to have our hands full.
This is all the stuff that we talk about on the message board at BamaInsider.com. And you guys can join right now and be part of that message board, $10 for an entire year or $1 for 4 months. Joseph, tell us what we can expect from you this week on the website and what you got going on.
Yes, so I'm going to be posting my interviews with Damari Brown, Ruben Bain tomorrow to 2023 targets. Be sure to check that out. We're also going to be focused on some other content items on the recruiting front, storylines leading up to early signing period, just other great things that we have in store for you all. Obviously, we encourage you to go to BamaInsider.com, check out our exclusive interview with Jaren Hamilton on his commitment to Alabama. I took those photos a couple of weeks ago. With Jaren, did a nice little photo shoot, up there in Gainesville. So, he was gracious enough to do an interview with us. So be sure to check that out on our YouTube page and, all the other great content on Bama Insider. Clint's rolling out some fantastic stuff as it relates to the portal. So, catch us there. Catch us on the Talk of Champions message board. We really look forward to talking with you all.
All right, guys. And don't forget tomorrow, Andrew Bone and recruiting with Andrew Bone. Our show will be on at 8 o'clock Central Time. That'll be our next program. Anytime Nick Saban talks, we'll have that. We're just kind of sitting back through championship weekend and figuring out if Alabama is going to make it into the college football playoff. If not, I'm guessing they'll be in the Sugar Bowl, which is not a bad consolation prize if you're not going to get into the college football playoff. An historic bowl. And look, I mean, who knows even how long these bowls are going to be around with the playoff coming. So, it might be one of your last chances to kind of get that bowl feel before things really change. I don't think for the better, but you know what? It's the world that we live in right now, Joseph.
Everything is changing. Everything in college football is changing. The transfer portal, NIL, bowl season, everything isn't like it used to be. But that also presents exciting times ahead, exciting storylines to follow. So we'll just adjust and go on the fly.
All right. Well, for Chris Daughtry behind the scenes, Clint Lamb, Joseph, and me, Mick Gillispie, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up. Be part of this YouTube channel. 80,000 of you guys now plus. So that means we're focused on 100,000. We want to have as many subscribers as fans at Bryant-Denny Stadium, just like Saturday when Alabama lowered the boom on the Auburn Tigers. Hey, Tigers. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up. That's a way of saying Roll Tide, and the bell is so that you know when we are live. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. And for Kyle Henderson, who puts all this together, I'm Mick Gillispie saying Roll Tide. We'll talk to you soon.
Roll Tide.